My introduction to Neil Young was the Decade album, the big 3-album set. And I remember sitting with my friends. I'd be like, 18 years old. It'd be really late at night, and we'd just be sitting around listening to Decade, and Like a Hurricane would come on, and it'd be late, and we'd be discovering Neil Young just opened everything up for me. That's when things got great.
Multi-emotionally dimensional.
It took me a longer time to warm up to what Neil was all about, because as I got older and listened to other styles of music, I didn't quite get Neil Young, because I knew he was a great songwriter and he had this country stuff. Well, then he got this rocky stuff. I didn't know what to expect from this guy, and I thought, he's overrated, you can't trust the guy, what are you gonna get with him?
What's more important, emotional intensity or sort of, posing. Neil's never been a poser. I think he's always, he has always come from the gut and from the heart.
Neil Young, well, yeah, Godfather. The Godfather of soul, no, the Godfather of grunge. Yeah, he probably hates that, although, a lot of grunge bands, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, on down the line, have taken a No-Tour 300 from Neil's catalog, probably ever since the beginning of the Buffalo Springfield.
This battle line is being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their minds, getting so much resistance from behind. We got to stop, children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Well, Neil Young essentially was not a major figure in the Buffalo Springfield as much as Stephen Stills was. It was always Stephen Stills' band. Neil Young's contribution to Buffalo Springfield, of course, was enormous. And his songwriting was quite quirky. It was very different from, say, Stephen Stills or the other guys in the band. He used imagery which is unusual in pop music at the time. A lot of people speculated since, and Neil Young himself probably admitted it, that may have been down to the fact that he had epilepsy, and the fact he had epileptic fits made him see kind of visionary things.
Yeah, this guy was different. You couldn't really pin him down. You couldn't define what he did. All you knew was that it was very distinctive. It was a sort of combination of intensity and fragility.
Neil Young had become pretty well known with the Buffalo Springfield in Los Angeles, and I think the band themselves, they're incredibly talented but very volatile outfit, because obviously Stephen Stills was Neil's kind of sparring partner, and they used to clash a lot, but both because they were both writing so many songs and battling to get them onto the record. And they'd had a few hits. I think the biggest one was For What It's Worth, which is a song by Stills. But they hadn't become as big as other LA bands like The Doors or particularly The Byrds. But I think had they gone on another year or two, they would have been huge. But I think they were too volatile and unstable to last, really.
Neil was somewhat in the shadow of Stephen Stills in Buffalo Springfield. He was not a natural band member. He was somewhat sort of, out on the edge with Buffalo Springfield. I think by the time he left, or stormed out on Buffalo Springfield. He was somewhat an unknown quantity. I don't think anyone necessarily would have predicted what kind of shape his solo career would take.
Stop, children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Well, I think the work that he did with Buffalo Springfield really did add another stone that helped pave his way. You got to remember, Buffalo Springfield only had one big hit, and that was For What It's Worth. It went to like number 7 on the Billboard chart. Nothing else broke the top 40. But being around those other guys and feeding off them and the way they approach songwriting and how they arrange the songs and all that sort of a thing, I think Neil, as talented as he was anyway, took what he needed from those other people.
His first album was somewhat unsatisfactory. It didn't really capture Neil as we know him now. It was slightly overproduced. It didn't have that kind of feel that he subsequently came to capture on his albums. It was very overdubbed. It used a recording process that made the sound somewhat sort of murky, and it sounds a bit odd today. There's some great songs on it, but it sounds like a bridge between the more overproduced sort of moments of Buffalo Springfield and the Neil Young to come on Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere and so forth.
The first solo Neil Young album was kind of more of a solo album, and the second one, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, was the first time he fully worked on record with Crazy Horse. And I mean, they're an incendiary band. They really are electric. They brought a whole new sort of punkish energy to a rather sort of hazy, lazy, trippy folk rock sound that was dominant in those days.
Oh, when he got together with Crazy Horse, I think it was the contrast he needed. There's only so much you can do with a guitar, harmonica, and vocal, really. And some songs really needed that, edginess or that bluesy, swinging sort of backbeat that Crazy Horse provided. Neil Young has a lot of great songs, and with Crazy Horse, when the intensity of the music had to complement the vocal, it was there. It just built and built and built like a storm coming in over the mountains or something like that.
I'll tell you what was important about Cinnamon Girl. Apart from the fact it's a great song, the lyrics are good, it's very short. It's a short song, it's like 2 minutes and change. And because of that, the radio programmers loved it. And it was just like Down by the River, except it wasn't 9 minutes long. It was 2 minutes long. And I think that was an important step for him because it got him on the radio.
There were several other songs before, but Cinnamon Girl I remember hearing that on the radio for the first time, wondering what the heck was this, and thus I go out and buy the album. And it was an instant classic and remains so on Canadian radio, certainly, a classic to this day.
Cinnamon Girl is the quintessential Neil Young. It's the 3-chord rocker. He does the rip-up guitar solo, that one-note solo in the middle. And then the extended false ending, we're talking 3.5, 3:45, and it's quintessential Neil, it's raw, it's edgy, lyrical. We all want to be with a Cinnamon Girl, relatable. It's a great rock and love song, quintessential Neil.
I think Crazy Horse provided a kind of musical understanding that maybe Neil Young didn't have before. because working with Buffalo Springfield, there were a lot of other songwriters in the band, a lot of big egos. And with Crazy Horse, I think it was a bunch of guys that got together and they communicated on a kind of a subliminal level. It was, they sort of spoke a different musical language. And instead of having to spend hours telling people what he wanted on these records and what he wanted to sound like, with Crazy Horse, they just plugged it in and then they went from there, and the ideas were just communicated through the music, and they just went, they just flew.
As a result of just, you know, playing around in Topanga Canyon, etc., he appeared on stage with them and subsequently decided that it would be a good idea to form a group. Part of the reason was he'd done these new compositions and he felt they required an electric sound. So consequently, he felt that maybe Crazy Horse, if he could get them to back him, they would provide the perfect complement to this sound. And that quickly evolved into, you know, the Neil Young and Crazy Horse group, which in early '69 recorded quite quickly, as it turned out, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, which was quite a classic album when we now look back and discover.
I think the future potential of the partnership with Crazy Horse, not only was it just the contrast that he had with the vocal ability, it's what those other members brought to the sound of Neil Young. I remember a great quote from him years ago. I wish I could cite where I heard it, but someone asked him about his success and, you know, was he surprised that he was getting so popular and selling albums because of his voice? And Neil said something like, "Well, but it's my sound, man." And he's right. No one sings like Neil Young. And when Crazy Horse got together with Neil Young, there was something about that almost warble, off-key thing that he had going on that the band was able to just get underneath that and bring it up to another level. And I think they did some great stuff together without even possibly realizing that they had a marriage that I think people would probably die to have.
Everybody knows This Is Nowhere. Additional energy for Neil, absolutely. Newfound confidence. A lot of the stuff was, again, loose, underwritten, so they were able to basically, when they could take it on the road, be allowed to do a lot of improv and extended type solos and a variety of tunes. And it's just really amazing what this group kind of brought to Neil. It was a mutual love affair between the members and Neil. Produced some fantastic, fantastic music.
I think songs like Down by the River have stood the test of time because they just have a feel which you can't fake, really. Certainly in technology they've been way surpassed. They sound of their time in that sense. You know, it's just an honest band of 2 guitars, bass, drums, what have you. But it's just so authentic, has such a good feel. All the players are interacting so well with each other and almost telepathically on the same wavelength. They're not particularly proficient musicians. That's not really the point. They're not sort of world-class, virtuoso musicians per se. But what they're doing, the way they're interacting, the way they understand which direction each other's going to take, like a sort of great free jazz band, it just really, really works. And it has a soul and an emotion coming off it as well, which you can't fake. Young at this point was very much sort of enjoying the fact that he'd found his own voice, you know, that he was finding the kind of music he wanted to make.
The tracks on Everybody Knows that really, I suppose, endure to this day are probably the ones where Young and Danny Whitten are kind of sparring together, rather in the way that Neil Young and Steve Stills did in Buffalo Springfield, but with a different kind of flavour. Danny Whitten was a very different sort of guitarist and singer, come to that, to Neil Young. But there's a real contrast there on tracks like Down by the River, Cinnamon Girl, and so on. Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, the title track. I just think it's one of the great sort of rock and roll sounds, really, that particular band. They'd only been playing with Neil for 2 weeks, but there's something just so electric and quite funky, really, about them. You know, they weren't brilliant musicians, but they were certainly kind of, there was something real about them.
A group who complemented him so well, who weren't on the face of it great players themselves. You know, they weren't great guitarists. I mean, Ralph Molina wasn't the world's greatest drummer, or Billy Talbot the world's greatest bassist, but they were field players. That's how they always described themselves. It was the mood of the songs that was important, not the technical competence of them. Crazy Horse could afford to make mistakes, and you loved them all the more for it. They were very human, and I think Neil Young's always been like that. He's always gone for the feel of the performance. Forget the fact, you know, he won't do 1,000 retakes, and he won't, you know, a million overdubs will not be on it. He did that to a certain extent on his first album. I think he referred to it as Overdub City, and he wanted a really clean, basic sound for the second one, which he did achieve.
After Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, you know, after the Gold Rush then came out and was quite different. It was much more, you know, laid back, if you like. It was predominantly acoustic. It was recorded for the most part in Neil's own house in Topanga Canyon.
After the Gold Rush was, you know, a little bit more mellower, cooler, some fantastic tracks. All in all, from start to finish, it's just classic Neil Young.
I was lying in a burned out basement with the full moon in my eye. I was hoping for a replacement when the sun burst through the sky. There was a band playing in my head, and I felt like getting high. Thinking about what a friend had said, I was hoping it was a lie.
The amount of ideas that are in After the Gold Rush, I think, are interesting. This is, unlike his older albums, this one seemed to be very cohesive, yet it went kind of all over the place. You had some folky stuff and some just plain weird stuff. After the Gold Rush is a very weird song. It's almost a science fiction song. I mean, the title After the Gold Rush, and it's Neil Young, you automatically assume it's a historical song, sort of a Civil War thing. But if you listen to the lyrics, it's about spaceships and moving to the sun, and it's a very odd song.
Well, I dreamed I saw the silver spaceships flying in the yellow haze of the sun. There were children crying and colors flying all around the chosen ones. All in a dream, all in a dream. The loading had begun. We were flying Mother Nature's silver sea to a new home in the sun.
It's a sort of an apocalyptic song inspired by a screenplay that the actor Dean Stockwell had written. And I think it's a sort of hippie song about, you know, what's happening to the environment, you know. It's quite topical, really, you know, what are we doing to Mother Earth, you know, and are we destroying the planet, and, you know, will we have to ultimately sort of leave the planet in silver spaceships?
Apocalyptic, surreal imagery, cinematic tone to it. It's a sad song, but it's a classic.
I was so proud that this guy was Canadian. I remember buying this album, just being so excited this guy was Canadian. There was so much there to absorb. Then I found Rolling Stone, which of course I read all the time, they hated it. They thought it was a piece of junk. Later, of course, this is the same magazine that hated every Led Zeppelin album too. Later they changed their mind and made it one of the great classic rock albums of all time. But it was, to me, it was it had everything on it. It had the 5 minutes of guitar, heavy guitar stuff with always a message going, some beautiful, beautiful lyrics, some beautiful, there's a song where a French horn, I think it is, comes in. It's just like completely unexpected, but very Neil Young.
Southern Man is on there. You got Nils going nuts on the piano. There's a lot of really, really good stuff on there. And again, you know, he's got the apocalyptic thing, Don't Let It Bring Me Down. He's got something a little bit more easygoing with Tell Me Why. And then he's slamming, you know, Lynyrd Skynyrd in Southern Man.
Neil Young is somebody that you can't really pigeonhole as a political singer, but occasionally, when he sees something he doesn't like, he's going to sing about it. And he's going to sing about it in a very direct way. And it's very, very effective. And a song like Southern Man really proves that.
There's nothing Neil likes more than just sort of courting controversy, really. And you know, I'm sure it just tickled him to death to annoy, you know, the typical left of centre sort of American liberal community by declaring support for Reagan. So you can't really trust Neil's politics. They're just about how he's feeling at any one time.
But again, it's, yeah, you're never sure if he's just adopting a position, because apart from anything else, he's Canadian, of course, and he's talking about America should do this, America should do that, when in fact he's never been an American citizen.
Neil has been in the States for 40 years, but most people who live in this country, Canada, consider him to be true blue Canadian. Now he'll tell you he's lived there for 40 years, paid taxes in the States for 40 years, but the reason he went to the States was to become known. And I think what's happening right now with Neil Young is a full circle situation where he went to the States to become recognized, to become known. And because it was a land of the free, home of the brave, you could do anything you want, you could say anything you want in an artistic way, and it was going to be maybe not appreciated by everybody, it was certainly going to be accepted. Now we live in a country, or live next to a country, where that's not the case. You speak your mind, and suddenly, if it's against the the current government and their point of view, you're out of line. You're protesting and you could even be arrested. I mean, it just seems completely different from the world that Neil Young wanted to enter to become famous now.
A lot of people don't even know he's Canadian anymore. He's been living in California for, what, 30 years now or more? Joni Mitchell, same deal. Hasn't lived in Canada for a very, very long time. They are judged on the merit and quality of their work.
Harvest is I think a much more commercially accessible album. It doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad album. Obviously it was a great album, it's a classic. But I'm not surprised it sold more than any other previous Neil Young album. You know, songs like Heart of Gold and Old Man, A Man Needs a Maid, it really, really put him on the map. And in his own words, I think it put him in the middle of the road.
It never got more commercially successful than Harvest for Neil. I mean, this was his big album. Heart of Gold was #1, and for many people it sort of defines Neil as the laid-back singer-songwriter, the archetypal guy in the patched denim jeans, singing about being a searcher for a heart of gold, you know, and I think it's slightly unfair to pigeonhole him like that with this record, because I actually think it's a rather underrated record, curiously. You know, there are sort of, you know, many people would say that, you know, Tonight's the Night is the greatest of his 70s albums, you know, because it's so dark, and Harvest, by contrast, is, you know, mellow and laid back and chilled out, and all those you know, things that you either love or don't love. But I think actually, yeah, I think it's a really good record, you know. When you listen to it without preconceptions, it's a fantastic record.
The songs on it were strong love ballads as well. They really crystallised Young as the forlorn singer-songwriter, and it took him, I think, on a higher level than James Taylor or Carole King or the other people at the time who were also recording quite almost saccharine singer-songwriter songs. And I think that's why Harvest, for a lot of people, is perhaps a bit too sweet for their tastes. And of course there's a tremendous amount of snobbery on the grounds that it was a #1 album, and critics hate that more than anything.
I mean, it sold so many copies and will always be in everyone's collection, always.
I've been to Hollywood, I went to Redwood, I crossed the ocean for a heart of gold. I've been in my mind in such a fine line, keeps me searching for a heart of gold, and I'm getting old.
Heart of Gold is just a definitive Neil Young song. I remember reading, I think it was in Chronicles, the Bob Dylan book, Bob Dylan said that he heard Heart of Gold on the radio, and he immediately thought, that's a song that he should have written. And I thought, if you could write a song that Bob Dylan wishes he wrote, that's something special.
Yeah, I think Heart of Gold is probably the signature Neil Young song. He's got a little bit of strife in there, he's got some hope in there, and it's what everybody wants. They want a nice, happy life, and at the end of that, it's not a pot of gold at the rainbow, it's a heart of gold. That's what Neil Young is all about. Do good, and good comes back to you.
Keep me searching for a heart of gold. I've been a miner for a heart of gold.
They say good songwriters can take a message that's this big and squash it down to this, and everyone still understands it. He took a song that was about a life of pain and desperation and made it in under 2 minutes. and everyone got it. I think it's masterful songwriting.
I caught you knocking at my cellar door. I love you, baby, can I have some more? Oh, the damage done. I hit the city and I lost my band. I watched the needle take another man. Gone, gone, the damage done.
Well, Needle and the Damage Done is, you know, is probably one of the most famous drug songs ever written. It was inspired by the plight of Danny Whitten, the Crazy Horse guitarist, who was one of rock's first real heroin casualties. You know, one of the first guys who just was completely obliterated by heroin. And Neil kind of loved this guy and just watched helplessly as he sort of sank into addiction.
There are very specific allusions in the song to Danny appearing at the cellar door, which I believe is a club in Washington. And, you know, it's got lines like, you know, knocking on my cellar door and stuff like that. It's a very different song from those that followed by Young about drugs. It was quite a very melodic song, very touching, very moving. It does have that image in it which I always found very problematical, that every junkie's like a setting sun. And I think I always said that, you know, a setting sun is one of the most beautiful images in nature. It's not something that you'd normally associate with a sordid junkie. And therein lies the rub, I think. If you project ahead to the album Time Fades Away or Tonight's the Night, in which he again deals with Danny Whitten and his feelings towards it, the images on those songs are very ugly, they're very powerful, they're very dark, and I don't think there's a darkness on Needle and the Damage Done. It's an elegy, really.
I sing the song because I love the man. I know that some of you won't understand. Milk, blood, to keep from running out. I've seen the needle and the damage done, a little part of it in everyone, but every junkie's like a setting sun.
One of the things that I think people probably don't know about Neil Young is that he did suffer a kind of deep depression in the early to mid 70s. I think he became very disillusioned. I think he found in his personal life things were quite a struggle. His relationships with women were difficult and painful, and that was reflected in the 3 albums known among Neil fans as the Doom Trilogy.
When the winter rains come pouring down on that new home of mine, will you think of me and wonder if I'm fine? Will your restless heart come back to mine on a journey through the past? Will I still be in your eyes and on your mind?
Time Fades Away was recorded live on the road, all new songs. But it's like a dress rehearsal for Tonight's the Night. It's a very, you know, dark, jaundiced sort of view of, you know, rock and roll and the counterculture and his own personal sort of feelings about his life. And, you know, for whatever reasons, this is one album that Neil has never countenanced being reissued on CD. It's never been officially reissued. And you know, it seems that it has something to do with his feelings about that time. It was not a happy tour by any means. I mean, I think it's a great record. And then he recorded Tonight's the Night, which is just a fantastic record. It's like a kind of wake, really, for Danny Whitten, and also for a roadie who OD'd called Bruce Berry. So it's the title track is a homage, really, to them. The whole album is like this kind of tequila-soaked sort of wake. It's very dragging and down, but extremely beautiful. I think it's a fantastic record. On the Beach is very different, but similarly real downer stuff. It's Neil, very alone. Sometimes, you know, Revolution Blues is quite angry. On the Beach is very depressed. Ambulance Blues sort of looks back over his career and is quite sort of bilious about the kind of commercialization of the folk scene. I mean, Neil sounds like someone who's kind of very alone at this point. So the Doom trilogy, I mean, it's some of his most enduring work, and we all love it. But it's certainly, you know, it's certainly not the kind of happiest time in his life, and he kind of emerges out of that period to record Zuma, where you know, he's clearly, I mean, he's described it as himself as emerging from the murk, and you know, it's kind of daylight again after this quite dark 2 or 3 years.
When you have a performer like Neil Young, a great songwriter, you can often tell a lot about their personal lives by the albums that they put out. You know, one album might be, you know, he's in love, or the other album might be about the death of a friend or a family member. And Zuma, to me, is a great classic breakup album. Songs like Stupid Girl, Don't Cry No Tears. The song Drive Back is a classic example of a breakup song. Drive back to your old town. I want to wake up with no one around. I mean, it pretty much says it all. Drive back to your old town. I want to wake up with no one around. Drive back to your old town.
Drive Back, you know, is a track that you would not have heard on the Doom trilogy albums. It does suggest that, you know, there's a sort of, this is a rejuvenated Neil. It's one of his great driving guitar tracks. His guitar playing is just sensational on this track. It's absolutely thrilling. It's a sort of pulverizing piece of you know, crazy horse rock, yeah, I think it's one of his greatest tracks.
Well, Drive Back's just a Neil Young rock song. I think it contains much of his kind of macho posturing at the time. It's Stupid Girl is also on that album, which is another example of Young playing the kind of macho, slightly sexist role, and Drive Back fits into that tradition. It works because it is such a driving rock song, if you'll pardon the pun. I mean, it works very, very well live, and does fit that album, which is almost like I always thought of Zuma as a sort of like a Neil Young sampler. It's got the great Cortez the Killer, it's got the driving rock of Drive Back, and it's got a good few ballads on there as well. And in fact, one of his earliest songs is on there, Don't Cry No Tears, which he wrote when he was a teenager. So it's a bit of all things to all people, and that's probably why people love it so much.
Cortez the Killer, Neil's time travel piece, back into history, a modern day conquistador. It's a killer track. It's the centerpiece of this album. And as he says in the Decade release, banned in Spain.
think most people remember Zuma for Cortez the Killer. That is the classic Young track. It's one of the sort of top 3 Neil Young rock tracks, along with Like a Hurricane, you know, for example, which is so great that it excuses him a multitude of sins.
Cortez the Killer has a lot of the themes that I think he would explore later on. It was about sort of glorifying the past as opposed to the future and what the world is like today. And he was talking about a past that doesn't exist anymore. And the way they seem to have an understanding of the world and life that Neil Young really, really loved to explore, and he still does. But a lot of that is long gone these days.
You came dancing across the water with his galleons and guns, looking for that new world and the palace in the sun. On the shore lay Montezuma with his coca leaves and pearl. In his halls he often wandered with the secrets of the world. His subjects gathered round him like the leaves around the tree, in their clothes of many colors for the angry gods to see. The women all were beautiful, the men stood straight and strong. They offered life in sacrifice so others could go on.
Neil's written 2 or 3 sort of epic tracks, if you like, you know, long tracks that sort of build to kind of frenzied kind of climaxes, if you like, and Cortez the Killer is probably the most famous of them, and it's there's just something very powerful about it, and in its evocation of the damage that the Spanish did to, you know, the indigenous peoples of South America. It makes its anti-colonial point very forcefully, and there's something brilliant about the image of he came dancing across the water.
Cortez the Killer is one of the greatest songs Neil Young ever recorded. It's the dominant track on Zuma. I think it eclipses everything else on that album, with some ease, as it turns out. It's one of Young's great epics, and for the first time he's using Aztec imagery, of all things, in a song. You shouldn't trust Neil Young as a historical chronicler, by the way. I mean, his account of what happens about Cortez is fantastical, to say the least. But as I'm sure he would point out, he was never that good a history student at school. But as an imaginative epic, it is fantastic. And I think the electric guitar work on that song is incredible. It's exquisite. It's so moving. It's Neil Young at his best. It takes the template of Down by the River and Cowgirl in the Sand and kind of takes it somewhere else. And I think this is the quintessence of Crazy Horse. This is one of the greatest collaborations that he ever did with members of Crazy Horse, and it's one of his greatest songs.
You know, live it's a track that just immediately creates this sort of mood of foreboding, and it does always produces some of his most sort of intense and lyrical guitar playing. It's just the perfect vehicle for Neil to kind of stretch out on, and all that kind of emotion comes pouring out of his amplifier.
Well, I think with Cortez the Killer, I mean, it's a song based on historical fact, as they say. And it worked because when the band got behind it, there were times in that song where they had to approach it just laid back and easy. Okay, here's someone coming up the river, they're looking at the new world, and what are we going to do with it, blah, blah. And then as you further get into the song, well, maybe the intensity has to come up a little bit. The band responds, it matches what the lyrics are saying and how Neil is singing them, then they have to back off. It works so well on many different levels. Like the relationship he had with Crazy Horse, I don't think many other bands had that same thing. It was just this unspoken bond, and without speaking a word or maybe not even looking at each other to, you know, sometimes guitar players will nod at the bass player to go into a different whatever. I don't think Crazy Horse really had to do all of that. And Cortez just seemed to work on so many levels. And it's a long song, and in the middle there's what sounds like that little jamming part. They got to freewheel a little bit. Neil got to sit back and watch them freewheel. It's just good structure, played well, and it all fits.
I love American Stars and Bars. The thing I love about it, besides the great music on the album, I think American Stars and Bars has one of the best album covers of any rock and roll album. You've got the native Indian, the mountains, and it's this sort of, the theme is very old Americana, yet it's the cover art is done in this kind of pop art Andy Warhol style that I just love, and I think that album is one of the great album covers of all time.
American Stars and Bars, this is kind of a mix mash of styles, written from 77 back to 1974 in 4 different locations, 4 different recording sessions. It had everybody from Linda Ronstadt to then unknown Nicolette Larson, as a matter of fact. There's some country tinged stuff, and there's some outright rockers. It's, you know, the flip side of Neil, you know, Neil Light and Neil with fries and gravy. It's great stuff.
Like a Hurricane is so hypnotic, and the song is so great. It reminds me of my university days, lying on the floor, early in the morning, listening to Decade, that old album, and just listening to that song. I just that is as good as it gets, in my opinion.
Once I thought I saw you in a crowded hazy bar, dancing on the light from star to star.
Like a Hurricane was recorded pretty much off the cuff by Crazy Horse one night. I think after a gig, you know, they went back in the studio late one night and just laid it down, to use the terminology. But it's a fantastic extended guitar workout number with some very good lyrics about, you know, romance and whether romance is just a dream, and a great track.
Well, Like a Hurricane is basically a folk song, and it's a great song, but it had a rock backing track. You know, you could take that chorus, you are like, I sing like a hinge, but you are like a hurricane, and if you put the right chords behind it, you could imagine, you know, Johnny Cash singing that, very slow and easy and countrified and all that kind of stuff, but it works best with that rock arrangement, because a hurricane is not soft. Hurricane is wind, and it's action, and there's stuff blowing around, so you got to have a driving, rocking song or a song structure behind it in order to convey the meaning of what he's talking about. Hurricanes aren't soft, they're hard.
Like a Hurricane is a return to the Crazy Horse, guitar, edgy, loose, underwritten type of song where they can stretch out and do solos and improv. I think it was a great return to form. Great song. Been covered by Roxy Music. I don't know if you ever heard that rendition, but they do the same. It's a song that, like I said, you can just stretch out and go and have fun with. It's a great track with great melodies and some hooks, and of course Neil's signature guitar riff.
When he came to Britain in 1976, he appeared for 3 nights at the Hammersmith Odeon, and that song was the centerpiece of every concert. People may have heard it before, possibly on bootleg, but most of the people there would never have heard it, so it was the surprise song of the set. And it was a guitar workout of immense proportions. He had this giant fan on stage, which was, you know, blowing stuff out of it that looked like he was in some kind of Hollywood movie or something. And of course he had long hair down here and it was blowing out here somewhere. It was unbelievable though, the intensity of the song. It got a standing ovation every night. I mean, it brought the house down. A lot of people probably bought American Stars and Bars simply to possess Like a Hurricane.
Neil once said, you know, you can predict my changes as easily as the sun coming up and the sun coming down. You know, he tends to sort of, he tends to follow a kind of, you know, an electric album, a loud electric album with a sort of more pastoral acoustic album, or, you know, roughly speaking, he's tended to sort of, you know, alternate between those two modes. So, you know, comes a time as Neil in acoustic mode. It was recorded in Nashville. It's like a revisiting of Harvest very consciously, and it was a big hit. Actually, it was a really successful album. I think it's a good record. You know, it's Neil doing sort of doing country inflected acoustic songs, you know, that some of them which are really, really pretty, like Already Won is a lovely song, and you know, there's harmonies from Linda Ronstadt, Nicolette Larson, and so forth. You know, it's a warm album, a lot of love and looking for love. I mean, it's that, you know, it's that side of Neil. I think it's again slightly overlooked, really, an overlooked record now.
And comes a time I thought it was a really kind of quite beautiful collection of songs, and he'd assembled all these kind of different country type musicians playing various, you know, acoustic instruments, and I think Emmylou Harris is on it and Nicolette Larson, all these kind of country type singers doing backups. And I think really enjoyable record, sort of in the Harvest vein a bit, sort of the country acoustic Neil. And I think a record probably unreasonably neglected.
Rust Never Sleeps, I think, is probably the most pivotal album in Neil Young's career. I mean, if you compare it to the album before that, Comes a Time, they couldn't be more different. And I think it's symbolic of what was going on at that time, because everything in the 70s when Neil Young was very popular was singer-songwriters. That was very popular. Then all of a sudden, the late 70s, punk rock hits, and the singer-songwriters in many ways became obsolete. And a lot of Neil Young's peers never quite got over that. I don't think Stephen Stills or Graham Nash or David Crosby ever really were as relevant after punk rock as they were before it. But Neil Young, he was able to see what was going on and to make a record that sort of translated what was going on and defined it. And it showed that Neil Young was more than just some old sensitive folky. He understood what rock and roll meant, and he could look at what was going on with punk rock and show that it's all rock and roll. And I think that's what was important about that album. I think it made a transition from his early days to his later career, and I think that's what kept him alive artistically.
Rust Never Sleeps was an album which made him many new fans among a new generation, kind of between the punk and grunge kind of eras.
Another thing that Neil Young has always done is, you know, stay abreast of change. You know, he's always been determined not to sort of be left behind or be some sort of, you know, classic rock dinosaur. So he's quite cannily always allied himself to whatever's kind of going on. He keeps himself young in that way.
What it was another great left turn. I mean, you got part of it acoustic, part of it electric, and wow, was it ever electric in some spots. And Neil, again, just throwing us another curve, another left turn, unexpected, but I think definitely a classic.
Rust Never Sleeps. I remember that summer really well. A bit of acoustic Neil, a bit of heavy-duty rocker Neil, Crazy Horse, and were they crazy? This is a great album. A really, really great album.
Into the Black, I think, was really important because it defined what was going on with rock and roll. I think a lot of people were kind of confused by what was happening with punk rock. They read about these bands that, you know, they were being spit at by the audience and they were wearing safety pins. And a guy like Neil Young, a lot of people were comfortable with Neil Young because he was a folkie. And Neil Young wrote this song, It's Better to Burn Out Than It Is to Rust, and he talked about Johnny Rotten. And I think he basically said, this is rock and roll. This is what I was doing when I started, and this is what they're doing now. And I think for a lot of people, it defined what was going on with punk rock, and it made people realize it's just rock and roll.
Into the Black. First track, first side, Into the Blue, acoustic. Last track, Into the Black. It's cranked up. The lyrics just slightly rewritten, but it's cranked up heavy duty. Sounds so great. And it's probably one of the most concise songs written about the entertainment industry. Turn it up loud, have a listen to it.
Kurt Cobain famously quoted Neil Young's Into the Black in his suicide note, quoted lines from that, "It's better to burn out than to fade away," which gives it added poignancy and resonance, and obviously then a generation, a multitude of Nirvana fans who perhaps weren't familiar with the song and with the album wanted to go back and find out what it was about and what had turned Kurt on to it so much.
Powderfinger is a great song. It's one of those classic story songs. It seems to have this sort of historical context. I'm not sure I understand exactly what's going on in it, but it's this, you know, guns and it seems to have this sort of Civil War theme going on, and it also rocks.
Powderfinger is one of the classic Neil songs. Why? Hard to say. It just immediately creates a strange kind of mythical mood. You're not quite sure what's going on. You know, it's like he's got himself into the sort of head of a sort of, you know, young boy or adolescent, you know, in I don't know, the 18th century, and you know, here they are, you know, under threat, and there are muskets, and you know, what exactly is going on, you know, and what a great name for a track, you know. It's just sort of Neil doing what only he can, which is creating a sense of the American past that's very vivid, that sort of pioneer period, and it's just got some great kind of guitar phrasing on it that keeps you kind of hooked in. It's not got a particularly knockout chorus. It doesn't need one. It's you know, it's kind of, you know, it's that sort of dragging, slow, electric Neil Young that, you know, that just defines what he is.
Daddy's rifle in my hand felt reassured. He told me red means run, son, numbers add up to nothing. When the first shot hit the dock, I saw it coming. Raised my rifle to my eye, never stopped to wonder why. Then I saw black and my face flash in the
sky. It sounds like it was conceived 100 years ago or something, but essentially it's about a young boy who is left to defend this piece of land from an invasion force, and he just gets blown away. There's a gun on the boat and it just blows him away, and part of the song is sung posthumously. You know, he's singing it from the grave. It's a wonderfully great narrative song because there are other characters in it who aren't really developed, but it's quite clear from the descriptions of them that this is old-time America. That he mentions somebody called Big John, who's an alcoholic, and it's been a long time since the river took Emmy Lou, and obviously Emmy Lou is somebody that drowns, but that's all you hear about her. And it's a great thing about Young. There's all these kind of loose ends in the song, but it's one of his strongest narrative songs.
Shelter me from the powder and the finger. Cover me with the thought that pulled the trigger. Just think of me as one you never figured.
His weaknesses might be, I don't think it's a weakness so much as it is a part of his style that may not suit everybody. And I think he just likes to go. I don't think he wastes a lot of time listening to his recordings over and over and changing them and tweaking them. He just likes to get in there and perform and make these albums and get them out. And that makes for some odd albums. Sometimes you've got an album that's, you know, Rust Never Sleeps, which is a beautiful, big, great album. And other times you get an album like Reactor, for example, which is still, I think, a great album, but it's not going to appeal to everybody. It was him. It sounds like it's recorded over a weekend with a lot of beer and Crazy Horse, and they go in the garage and they bash out these songs and they make a record. And who's to say that's a bad thing? You know, it's not Dark Side of the Moon, but it's still a great rock and roll record.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Superstar is one of the more melodic tracks on Reactor. Reactor is a much misinterpreted album by Neil Young. He had recently done Rust Never Sleeps, and suddenly, you know, he's doing Hawks and Doves and Reactor. The reason people didn't get Reactor is because they had no idea what was going on in Neil Young's personal life. He'd recently witnessed the birth of his second son, who was severely handicapped, and as a result he had to spend a lot more time at the ranch. Now his son Ben was going through this incredibly intense therapeutic program, which was taking up all of Neil Young's time, and it was the first time probably in his life that he'd ever been taken away from his music. And Ben was doing this kind of what they called this patterning program, which were all these repetitive exercises, and he had to keep doing these repetitive exercises over and over and over and over and over. And strangely, or perhaps not so strangely, that translated weirdly into Neil Young's music. There's a song on Reactor called T-Bone, which is one of the most excruciating Neil Young songs ever recorded, and it's basically Neil Young repeating "Ain't got no T-bone" endlessly until you actually want to string him up. I think it's one of the least loved Neil Young songs, but it is quite amusing apart from that. But Reactor should be reinterpreted. I think it's the birth of grunge.
Opera Star is a great song. I think Opera Star is the song you notice first because it's sort of funny and it's got the ha 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 stuff on it.
Opera Star is a song, if you read the lyrics, is I think really autobiographical. It's Neil saying, nobody is gonna make me anything except what I want to be. And no matter what happens, I'm still gonna keep doing things the way I want to do it.
The 80s were not a happy period for Neil, and it then sort of ushers in this strange period in his career. Now I think a lot of the kind of big artists of the 70s struggled to find a musical foothold in the 80s because everything changed so dramatically. You know, in the age of MTV, in the age of synthesizers and haircuts and makeup and all of this stuff. What did Neil Young mean in the age of, you know, Culture Club? You know, suddenly he did look like a dinosaur. And so what Neil did really was just experiment wildly through the 80s. He kept trying on different hats, most of which looked rather silly, you know, and you felt like he lost touch with what, you know, made him great. He couldn't, You know, he couldn't really stay true to his own musical sort of spirit. I think one should applaud anyone who takes risks and tries something different. But with Neil, it's slightly smacked of desperation.
Here's an icon, a legend, you know. You watch him from the Buffalo Springfield days, and when he was a young rocker through The Last Waltz, and when he was on stage, and the stuff that he's gone through, and his kids, and politics, and almost dying in 2005 with the aneurysm. It's quite a legacy. It's quite incredible what this guy has accomplished. Very unique musician who can just, he's like a chameleon that goes through the ages and reacts to the times, and he's quite a stunning performer. He really is.
Neil live is a curious mixture of sort of highly charismatic and, you know, slightly embarrassing. I mean, I think, you know, he lurches about in this rather uncoordinated way, and he's quite tall, but he's quite ungainly, and he's sort of, you know, hunched over his guitar, and there is a bit of the sort of embarrassing uncle about him. You know, you do sort of want him to behave with a little more dignity. But I mean, actually, I think it's great that he doesn't, because he's so, you know, he gets so into his music, especially, you know, when he's going off on a kind of long guitar solo. You know, that he's just sort of head banging, kind of, you know, stamping his foot and just getting really kind of carried away. He isn't sort of cool, you know. Neil's never been elegantly wasted or super cool, but, you know, at the end of the day, you know, what's more important, you know, emotional intensity or sort of, you know, posing. And Neil's never been a poser. I think he's always, you know, he has always come from the gut and from the heart.
I had seen Neil on a couple of occasions, always great, you never knew what was going to happen. And so many people, when he'll show up with a pump organ and that's it, are disappointed and so on, but he always pulls it off. This time, he goes on stage at the Queenie, and the first song, and of course, he just shows up, he breathes in, people go nuts. And the first few notes go by, and suddenly he just says, stop, we fucked up, we're going to start again. Huge ovation. People just love that stuff. And then he knocked his notes onto the floor of on the stage. And so, you know, and he's singing, and he starts again, and he's singing, and he says, you know, no, we got to stop again. I just can't, I never look at these notes, but there they are on the floor. I got to have them in front of me just to make me feel comfortable. So endearing, so unusual, so unslick. And yet it was just so involving for everyone in the audience.
Here is a guy who is multi-emotionally dimensional. He feels what he plays what he feels. A musician's job is basically to reflect how they feel internally, personally, with the environment around them, people that are associated with that particular musician. He is a magician. He fuses everything. And over the years, he's just never, ever, ever lost his passion. You know, the guy's 60. He still rips it up like a teenager. You know, just he can almost rip a guitar apart. It's just incredible when you see him play and do a solo. It's absolutely fascinating to watch.